Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Samsul Fahri and student number is H123313, majoring in English Language Education, batch 23, Universitas Sulawesi Barat. In this video, I explain about presupposition and entailment. Why this matter? The meaning of language is not only explicit but also implicit. Language does not only convey meaning directly through spoken words, but also implicitly through context, tone of voice, situation, and shared knowledge between the speaker and listener. For example, when someone says, "It's cold here, isn't it?" The implied meaning could be a request to close the window or turn up the AC temperature. Help distinguish between state information and assumed information. Understanding implicature in language help us distinguish between information that is explicitly stated and information that is understood without being mentioned. This is important to prevent message from being misinterpreted. For example, when someone says, "I've already eaten," they might also be implying that they do not want to be offered food again. Third point is relevant in communication, media, advertising, and language analysis. Understanding implicature and implied meaning is highly relevant in various contexts of modern life. In everyday communication, this helps us grasp the true intent. In media and advertising, implicit meaning is often used for subtle persuasion. In linguistic analysis, it forms the basis for understanding how message function in specific culture and social context. What is entailment? Logical relationship between two sentences. So, entailment basically means the logical relationship between two sentences. If the first sentence is true, then automatically there's other information that must also be true. The relationship isn't about feelings, context, or assumption. It's about pure logic. If A is true, B must be true. The principle is simple. If sentence A is true, then sentence B must also be true. For example, Lisa has a cat. Lisa has an animal. If A is true, B must be true because cats are animals, but the converse is not necessarily true. Pet doesn't necessarily mean a cat, dependent of context, perspective, or situation. Unlike implied meaning or interpretation, entailment does not depend on context, speaker's intent, or situation. Whether read in class, at home, or in outer space, as long as A is true, B remains true too, so it is objective and consistent. Example of entailment. In the slide, we see an example of entailment. The first sentence is, "John killed the spider." If that sentence is true, then there is another piece of information that is also automatically true, namely, that spider is dead. So, from the act of killing, we can conclude that the result is the spider is already dead. We don't need the person to say it directly because logically it must be true. Now, the important thing to note is the last part. Entailment does not work in reverse, meaning if we only know the spider is dead, it doesn't necessarily mean John killed it. The spider could have died for other reason, for example, stepped on by someone else, crushed by a falling book, or died of old age. So this example shows that entailment is one directional, not two directional. Next slide. Key features of entailment. There are several important characteristics of entailment that we need to remember. The first point is accommodation. This means that listeners or readers automatically receive additional information that arises from entailment without needing it to be explained again. For example, if someone says, Ado, stop smoking, we automatically understand that she used to smoke before, even though it is not stated directly. Second point is cannot be reversed. Entailment is like a one-way street, no two-way. So if sentence A implies B, it doesn't necessarily mean that sentence B implies A. For example, A. Jack bought car. B. Jack owns a vehicle. If A is true, then B must be true. But if you only know B, it doesn't necessarily mean A is true. He might have a motorcycle, not a car. The third point is cannot be cancelled. Entailment cannot be retracted or cancelled without making the sentence sound weird. For example, John killed the spider, but the spider isn't dead. This sentence becomes illogical because it contradicts the logic of entailment. Next point is rejection causes contradiction. If we reject the entailed part, the result is a contradiction. So if someone says Lucy has a sister, and another person replies, no, Lucy doesn't have any siblings. There is really a contradiction because the entailment Lucy has a sister means Lucy has a sibling. So, in short, entailment is consistent, one way, and cannot be cancelled without making the sentence logically false. Next slide. What is presupposition? Presupposition basically is information or an assumption that is considered already known by the listener before the main sentence is uttered. So the speaker doesn't need to explain it again because it's assumed to be common knowledge. The first point is information or assumption considered already known. For example, Ado, stop going to the gym. The sentence has a presupposition that Ado used to go to the gym because if he never went to the gym, he couldn't have stopped going there. Second point is depends on context and shared knowledge. Unlike entailment, which is logical and objective in nature, presupposition heavily depends on context and shared knowledge between the speaker and the listener. A sentence can make sense or not depending on whether both parties know the context. Next point is still appears even if the sentence is negated. Interestingly, the presupposition still appears even when the sentence is made negative. For example, Tom regrets buying that car. Negative. Tom doesn't regret buying that car, but still carry the presupposition that Tom once bought that car. So, even though the sentence is changed, the hidden information remains active. Next, example of presupposition. First, what is presupposition? In pragmatics, a presupposition is an assumption that is already considered true by the speaker and the listener before a sentence is uttered. In other words, there is hidden information that remains attached whether the sentence is affirmed or denied. First point, example sentence. Ado, stop smoking. Here, there is a presupposition or assumption that automatically arises, namely that Ado used to smoke before. If not, the sentence stop smoking wouldn't make sense because stopping indicates an activity that has been done. So, even though it's not explicitly stated, we understand that Ado was a smoker in the past. Second point is negation test. In presupposition, we perform a negation test to see if the assumption still holds. The negative sentence, Ado did not stop smoking. Even though the sentence is negated, the assumption that Ado used to smoke remains. The listener will still assume that Ado smoked before. Only the action of stopping is denied. Presupposition is information that is still considered true even if the main sentence is changed to a negative form, question, or other forms. Next, presupposition triggers. In pragmatics, presupposition triggers are words or linguistic structure that automatically evoke certain assumption in a sentence. Even if the sentence is modified or negated, those assumptions remain intact. The slide provides three examples of types of presupposition triggers. First, definite noun, the host. Specific nouns, such as the host, give rise to the assumption that the listener already knows the host being referred to. For example, I will visit the house again. Assumption, the host is already known to both the speaker and the listener from before. Second point is verbs. Start, stop, regret, realize. Certain verbs like start, stop, regret, and realize always carry information about the state before the action. For example, he started studying Chinese. Assumption, previously he hadn't been studying Mandarin. She regretted leaving the party early. Assumption, she did leave the party early. I didn't realize you were here. Assumption, you are indeed here. Thus, this verb always assume a prior condition or fact that has already occurred. Third point is question. Why are you late? In certain question form, a preposition arises from what is being asked. For example, why are you late? Assumption, the person is indeed late. Even if answered with a denial, such as I'm not late, the question has already introduced the assumption that late occurred. Next, contingency under negation. In pragmatics, one of the main characteristics of presupposition is the persistence or what is called contingency under negation. This means that even if a sentence undergoes a form change such as becoming a negative sentence, a question, or another form, its basic assumption remains unchanged. The first point, what does it mean? When someone makes a statement, the presupposition that arises is not only attached to the affirmative sentence. If the sentence is negate or question, the assumed information still remains in the listener's mind. In other words, presupposition does not disappear when the sentence is modified. Second point is form of change that still maintain the presupposition. Negation. Sentence is changed to negative. question change to question form. Other forms, such as passive sentence, compound sentence, etc. In all those forms, the assumed information remains intact. Next point is example. Tom won that race again. Presupposition, Tom has won that race before. If negate, Tom did not win the race again. The presupposition remains the same. Tom already has a previous win. So the change from a positive sentence to a negative one does not eliminate the assumption that Tom has won before. Next, cancelable versus not cancelable. In pragmatics, it is important to distinguish between presupposition and entailment because both are forms of inference, but they work differently. The main difference lies in whether the assumed information can be cancelled or not. First point is presupposition cancelable. Presupposition is an assumption that arises from a sentence, but the assumption can be cancelled or withdrawn through additional context. For example, Buddy stopped coming to the gym. Actually, he never came. The first sentence presupposes that Buddy had come to the gym before. However, the part actually he never came cancelled that presupposition. Second point is entailment, not cancelable. Unlike presupposition, entailment is information that must be true if the original sentence is true. Therefore, entailment cannot be cancelled. For example, Buddy killed that fish, but the fish didn't die. This shows a contradiction because the concept of kill already entails that the fish should be dead. If the second part denies information that should be true, then the sentence becomes illogical. Next, application. Presupposition is not just a theoretical concept in pragmatics, but also has many applications in everyday life. By understanding how presupposition works, we can be more critical in receiving information and more effective in communicating. The first point is language analysis. In language analysis, presupposition help us uncover the hidden meaning behind a sentence. For example, when someone says John finally graduates, this implies that John took a long time to graduate. So presupposition help us understand information that is not explicit stated. Second point is debate and persuasion. In debate or rhetoric, presupposition is often used to control the narrative. For example, when did you stop ignoring my message? Please assume that we were in the ignoring previous message, even if that's not true. Third point is media and advertising. Advertisements often exploit presupposition to supply influence bias. For example, use this cream again for smooth skin. It assumes that our skin is not smooth or that we have used it before. Fourth point is everyday communication. In everyday conversation, presupposition help communication run more efficiently because not all information needs to be repeated. For example, I'm taking my sister to school. Implicitly, the listener already knows that the speaker has a sister. Next, K, takeaway. First point is entailment, true of A guarantees true of B. Entailment is a logical relationship between two statements. If statement A is true, the statement B must also be true. For example, A, all birds can fly. B, pigeons can fly. If A is true, then B is automatically true. However, if B is true, A is not necessarily true. This is important in understanding logic and inference in language. Second point is presupposition. Assumption remains even if sentence form change. Presupposition is an assumption that remains implied in the sentence even if the sentence is changed or negated. For example, sentence, the current king of France is bald. Presupposition, there's a current king of France. If we change it to the current king of France is not bald, the assumption that there is a king of France still appears. This shows that meaning does not only come from explicit words, but also from assumption carried by the sentence structure. Third point is important difference, explicit versus implicit meaning. This point emphasizes the importance of distinguishing between meaning that is directly stated and meaning that is implied. Explicit meaning, he eats rice, clear and direct. Implicit meaning, he is full, can imply that he just ate. Understanding this difference helps us capture the true intent in communication, especially in cultural context, humor, or sarcasm.